Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive. Tonight's story is titled, What the Quiet Sees. Let the Shadows Speak. Part 1. The ceiling cracked again last night. I don't sleep anymore. Not because of insomnia. Not really. I think the right word is avoidance. Most nights, I'll lie in bed and stare at the ceiling until dawn breaks like a slow wound across the blinds. It started after I moved into this place, a third-floor apartment in a crumbling old house near the train yard. Cheap rent, high ceilings, and thin walls. At night, I hear everything. The heater coughing like an old smoker. The neighbor below playing jazz records that melt into static by 3 a.m. The couple across the hall fighting softly. Always softly, like they're scared something might overhear. And then there's the dripping. Not from the faucets or the gutters. It comes from the ceiling. Just one drip at a time. Slow, patient. It doesn't speed up or stop. I used to think it was water, maybe from a pipe or a leak, but there's no stain on the plaster. No dampness. Just that sound. And something about it doesn't sit right. It never splashes. No matter what I put beneath it, a glass, a towel, a cheap metal bowl, it never makes a sound when it lands. I'm Elliot Stone, 32, freelance editor, part-time barista, fully fledged insomniac and recently haunted man. This started 3 weeks ago, the night after I came back from my grandmother's funeral. She passed in her bathtub, slipped, cracked her skull, bled out. That's what the coroner said. But when I went to the old house to help clean out her things, I saw the bathroom. The way the mirror had fogged over. The smell. The dark, almost oily streak down the side of the tub like someone had dragged something heavy out of it. I didn't tell my mom. She was already unraveling. I just nodded and said I'd take some of Grandma's books. She used to write notes in the margins of everything she read. Weird little phrases. Circles around certain words. Like she was trying to tell a story nobody else could read. The first night back in my apartment, I woke up gasping. Not from a dream. There was no dream, but with the taste of copper thick in my mouth. It felt like I had bitten my own tongue, but there was no blood. That's when I heard the first drip, and it hasn't stopped since. I tried everything, called the landlord, checked the plumbing, even climbed into the attic with a flashlight. Nothing, except I found a toy, a small plastic car, blue, chipped, and dust-caked like it hadn't been touched in years. I don't own any toys. I don't have kids. I don't even like kids. Still, I brought it downstairs and left it on my nightstand, just to prove it wasn't real. But the next morning, it wasn't there. It was under my bed, and it was wet. That was the first night I thought about him, about Tommy. My cousin. He drowned when we were 8. Backyard pool. I saw it happen. He looked right at me when he slipped under, and I didn't move. I've told myself 1,000 times I was just a kid, but the guilt, it stuck. That night, I remembered his eyes. Not afraid, not angry, just watching. And as I lay in bed, listening to the silent drip that never splashed, I realized something. It had started in the same corner where I kept the box of my grandmother's books. The next day, I dumped every book out onto the living room floor. One fell open on its own, an old collection of folklore. Pages yellowed, brittle. She had underlined a single passage. Some sights are not for the waking, and some things only come when called by the quiet ones. She'd written next to it, "The boy in the tub, don't let him look back." I didn't sleep that night either. Part 2. The boy in the water. I took the books and locked them in the closet. It didn't help. That night, I slept on the couch with the TV on, something dumb and loud to keep me tethered to the real world. But the dripping followed me. It didn't come from the ceiling this time. It came from inside the walls, like something crawling between the sheetrock, slow and wet and deliberate. I turned the volume up. Didn't matter. It was in my ear now. Drip, drip, drip. No rhythm, just that same mocking patience. And then I saw him. It was around 4:13 a.m. I know because I just checked the microwave clock on my way to the kitchen, trying to prove I was awake. That I was still real. And there, standing at the far end of the hallway, just beyond the bathroom door, a boy, about 6, maybe 7, pale skin, no shirt, wet hair sticking to his forehead, not moving, just watching. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. And then, just like that, he was gone. I didn't go to work that day. Didn't shower. Didn't eat. I sat on the floor of my living room with a notepad and tried to draw what I saw. But every time I lifted the pencil, my hand started to shake. I kept messing up the eyes. They weren't angry or scared. They were expecting, like he already knew I would come looking for him. That evening, I called my cousin Lorna. She's a social worker, deals with trauma cases, child psychology, all that. I didn't want to tell her what I really saw, so I framed it like a dream I couldn't shake. She asked me one thing that stuck. Does the boy remind you of anyone you couldn't save? I didn't answer, because the truth is, it wasn't just Tommy anymore. It was something else, something older, and I think it wears the faces we don't want to see again. That night, I dreamed of water. Not just any water. Cold bath water, the kind that prunes your fingers and smells like old pipes. I was submerged, floating on my back, staring at the ceiling. The dripping was louder under the surface. Every drop struck like a hammer inside my skull. And then I felt something take my hand, gently, almost lovingly. I looked to my right and saw him again. But this time his eyes were black. No iris. No white. Just void. He opened his mouth to speak. And I woke up choking. The taste of copper filled my mouth again. I ran to the bathroom. Nothing in the mirror. Nothing behind the curtain. But when I turned to leave, something caught my eye. The toilet tank lid. It was open. I never opened it. No one does. But now it was cracked, slightly tilted. And inside, floating in the rust-tinted water, was the blue toy car. The same one I'd found in the attic. The same one I'd left under my bed. I reached for it, hesitating, and touched the water. It was warm. I called Lorna again. This time I didn't lie. Told her everything. The dripping, the boy, the dreams, the toy, even the books from Grandma. There was a long silence on the line before she said, "Elliot, I don't think you're going crazy, but I do think you're being followed." By what? I don't know. But if it's like you say, if it waits, then maybe it's not trying to hurt you. Maybe it's just trying to show you something. And what happens when I finally see it? She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Don't look directly, not until you know what it is." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the hallway, right outside the bathroom door, waiting, listening. The dripping was louder than ever. And at exactly 3:11 a.m., the door creaked open on its own. A breeze brushed my skin like damp fingers. And through the fog that spilled out, I heard the unmistakable sound of a child's voice. "You looked once, just not far enough." I stood. The hall seemed longer, the air denser. My legs trembled, but I stepped forward anyway. And then, asterisk, from inside the fog, I saw a hand reaching for the doorframe. Black, glossy, not like skin, more like oil that had learned to move. Part 3. The House of Still Voices. I didn't scream when I saw the hand. I didn't run. I don't think I even breathed. Just stood there, one bare foot on the bathroom tile, staring at that long, dripping black hand curling around the doorframe like it belonged there, like I was the intruder. It moved slowly, fingers twitching, not like muscle but like memory, like it was remembering how to be human. And just as suddenly, it pulled back into the fog. The door closed, and the dripping stopped. The silence that followed was wrong. It wasn't peaceful. It felt held, like breath in a throat before a scream. I backed away. My own hands were shaking now, cold with sweat. The floor beneath me felt slick even though it was dry. I grabbed my phone and left the apartment. Didn't lock the door. Didn't care. Lorna didn't say anything when she opened her door and saw me on her porch at 4 in the morning, holding a box of books and a soaked blue toy car. She just stepped aside and said, "Come in." Her apartment smelled like tea and laundry. Clean, safe, like it belonged in a world where nightmares stayed in dreams. I collapsed on her couch and finally spoke. "There's something in my apartment." "Yeah," she said. "I believe you. I don't think it wants to kill me. I think it wants me to see." She sat across from me, pulling her blanket tighter. "Tell me everything again, from the start." I told her about the dripping, the dreams, the toy car, the voice in the fog, and most importantly, the book. The one for Grandma, the one with the note. "The boy in the tub, don't let him look back." Lorna frowned. "What was your grandmother like near the end?" "Paranoid," I said. "Obsessed with water. She used to unplug the bathtub, even when it was empty. Said something could crawl up." "Did she live in an old house?" "Yeah." "Near a church?" "What?" Lorna stood and went to a drawer. She pulled out a file, yellowed, full of clippings and handwritten notes. She dropped it in front of me, because so did mine. Inside the folder were cases. Old ones, going back decades. Some newspaper clippings, others just police summaries. Unexplained drownings. Children missing after claiming to see the black boy in the drain. Scrawled notes in different handwriting. Witnessed the still. Don't look when it looks back. They only come when the silence is kept too long. What the quiet sees becomes real. I looked up at her. "Where did you get this?" "It's been passed around for years. My mentor gave it to me when I was doing trauma outreach near Deepwell. That's where most of these reports started." I felt my pulse jump. My grandmother lived near Deepwell. Lorna nodded. "Then I think this has something to do with your family." We stayed up the rest of the night, combing through the pages. The black hand, the boy in the bathroom, the taste of metal. It was all there. Different locations, different names, but always the same events. In every case, it started after a death in the family, a child seeing something they couldn't explain, and a room with running water. One scribbled line chilled me most. "Witnesses must not break silence. Speaking draws the drip. Looking binds it." At dawn, I took a shower at Lorna's. No dripping, no black streaks. But as I stood there, letting the hot water run down my face, I realized something. The toy car hadn't just followed me. It was coming back, because I had seen it once, and I had looked again. I never should have looked again. That night, I slept on Lorna's couch, and I dreamed of the house. Not mine, not Grandma's. A different one, ancient, drowned in shadow, with bathtubs in every room. No mirrors, no windows, just tubs and silence. And in each one sat a child, still as death, staring down into black water. Only one looked up, and he smiled. Part 4. The Ones Who Looked. 2 days later, I went back. Lorna didn't want me to. She said the rules were unclear. Said whatever this thing was, it fed on recognition. And now that I'd seen it, now that I'd talked about it, researched it, named it, it had grown stronger. But I couldn't stay away. Not with what we'd found in that file. Not with what my grandmother may have known, and definitely not with the feeling I got every night that something was waiting for me to come home. So I did. The apartment smelled stale, like water that had sat too long in rusted pipes. Nothing looked touched. No broken glass, no scratch marks. Just silence. But the dripping was back. Only now, it didn't come from the ceiling. It came from the kitchen sink. Drop by drop. No splashes. Just disappearance. I walked over and turned the faucet handle, already closed tight. But the sound kept going. I looked beneath the sink. Nothing. Dry pipes. No leak. I opened the drawer next to the fridge where I kept loose papers and found it. A letter. Unopened. With my name on it in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Grandma's. My hands were ice as I tore the envelope open. Inside, a single piece of yellowed paper. "Elliot, if you're reading this, It means the drip came back. I hoped it wouldn't. I hoped you'd be free of it. It comes to the quiet ones. The ones who listen too well. The ones who leave their heads open at night like doors without locks. You were always like me, watching more than speaking, feeling more than showing. That's how it finds you. There are people who have seen it and survived. Not many, but there's one who might still remember how. Look for Elsie at Blackwater Hospice. Don't let the child speak your name. Love always. Nana. I read it twice. Then again. My fingers trembled not just from fear, but recognition. I had let it speak my name. That first night, the whisper in the steam. Elliot. I left that same hour. Drove across town to the address scribbled on the file folder Lorna gave me. Blackwater Hospice, room 209. The receptionist didn't ask many questions. Apparently Elsie hadn't had visitors in years. Room 209 smelled like bleach and plastic. The lights buzzed above, casting a pale glow over the frail figure curled in the bed. He looked ancient, bones more than man. His eyes were closed, but his lips moved like he was mumbling something through sleep. I stepped closer and realized it wasn't sleep. He was praying, whispering the same words over and over again. Don't let it in. Don't let it in. Don't look. Don't look. His name was Lionel Cartwright. He used to be a pastor in Deepwell back in the 70s, before the town was practically erased by a flood and a handful of local suicides. Lorna found his name in a newspaper clipping about a child who survived an incident in a church basement. The article never described what the child saw. I sat beside him and gently said, "Mr. Cartwright, I need to ask you something." His lips stopped moving. His eyelids twitched, and then, very slowly, he opened his eyes. They were cloudy. One was fully white, but the other still had a pinpoint of brown in the center. He looked at me and whispered, "You've heard it, haven't you? The dripping." I nodded. "It said your name?" I nodded again. "Then it knows your voice, and it's inside the silence now." I asked him what it was. He didn't say its name, just called it the drip. Sometimes the witness, sometimes the child of stillness. It doesn't hunt like other things. It waits. It doesn't need to break in. It waits for you to open the door by speaking, by remembering, by watching. Watching what? The wrong thing. The thing beneath the world. The thing we left behind in the water. I tried to ask more, but his breath was growing thin. He squeezed my hand, tighter than I expected from someone so frail. It showed me my daughter, after the flood, smiling, arms outstretched. But she wasn't real. She was hollowed. "What did you do?" I looked, and what did you see? His one brown eye filled with tears. Her mouth was full of hands. He passed out again after that. I sat in the chair for another hour, stunned. I wasn't alone. There were others, survivors, but all of them were broken. And somehow I was next. When I returned to my apartment, the front door was open an inch. The floor was wet, and I could smell copper and oil. Part 5. The Mouth of Silence. I didn't go inside. Not at first. I stood outside my apartment, the key still in my hand, and watched the front door sway slightly with the draft, open just an inch. Just enough. The light from the hallway barely reached the threshold. But even from here, I could see the water. A thin trail of dark moisture stretching from the kitchen to the living room. It shimmered like oil. Not splashed, placed, like it had been poured in a single, deliberate motion. The air was wrong. Not cold, not warm, just waiting. I took a breath and stepped inside. Nothing moved. No dripping. No voices. Just silence so complete it rang in my ears. I walked past the couch, past this still glowing television screen I never remember turning on. The blue car was sitting perfectly centered on the coffee table, upright. The living room window blinds were fully shut, but light bled through the cracks like the room was submerged under thin water. And then I saw the mirror. It wasn't mine. My apartment didn't have a full-length mirror in the hallway. But there it was, tall, dusty, warped around the edges like heat had melted the glass into waves. It faced the bathroom door, and in the reflection, I could see it. The child, standing motionless, his eyes hollow, his mouth open, but the mouth didn't form words. It dripped. Thick, black liquid poured from it like saliva made of tar. And it wasn't hitting the ground. It was floating, drifting upward like smoke in reverse. I turned away from the mirror and looked at the hallway. Empty. No child. No mirror. Just a faint hiss of my breathing. When I turned back, the mirror was still there, even though there was now nothing behind me to reflect. That's when I remembered what Grandma wrote. Don't let the child speak your name. My breath hitched. Had it already spoken to me? Had it finished saying what it wanted? I tried to leave, tried to turn, to run, to scream, but something locked in my jaw. My throat closed like a fist. My body froze, not from fear but from command, like I was being watched from inside myself. And I felt it again. The copper, the taste of metal flooding the back of my tongue. Not blood, something older, like the scent of a closed tomb. My feet moved on their own. Step by step, I walked to the bathroom door. It opened before I touched it. Steam spilled out. Not hot, not cold, just dense. Too thick for the size of the room. It swirled around me like it had weight, like it wanted to touch skin. Inside the bathroom, everything looked wrong. The tub was full, brimming with ink-colored water. Still, perfectly level, and above it, suspended in the air by no visible means, was the toy car, rotating slowly, dripping, each drop hitting the surface of the water without a splash. Each drop disappearing, like time didn't apply here. On the mirror above the sink, words were written backward. Do not break the silence. I reached out to touch them. My finger didn't smear the letters. It sank through the glass, and I saw something move on the other side. A hand, too long, too thin, reaching toward me from behind the reflection. It wasn't trying to grab. It was mirroring me, moving with perfect synchronicity except for the twitch. It twitched a second before I did. Suddenly, I remembered something from the folder Lorna gave me. A quote, scrawled at the bottom of a page in red ink. The reflection speaks first. I pulled my hand away. The glass rippled, and from deep inside that mirror, so deep it felt like it came from underground, I heard the voice again. You're already inside. My apartment disappeared. I don't mean I passed out. I mean the walls around me faded, pixel by pixel, into static and then into nothing. Black space. The bathroom dissolved into an endless corridor of white bathtubs. And in each one sat a child with their back turned to me. Still, silent, waiting, until one of them turned around. And it was me, younger, maybe 8, wet hair, blue lips, and he said something without moving his mouth. You looked again? I screamed, not out loud inside my head, but nothing came out, because there was no sound in this place, and no one was listening anymore. Part 6. The witness room. I woke up in the tub, the real one, in my apartment, but the water was gone. Everything was dry, bone dry. My clothes clung to my skin, damp with sweat, not water. My mouth was parched. My limbs didn't move at first. For a long time, I just lay there, watching a single crack run along the ceiling like a vein. My ears were ringing. No dripping, no sound at all. Just that awful, oppressive silence. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't just silence. It was listening. I sat up slowly. The toy car was still there, on the sink now. Clean, dry, like it had never touched water. I stood, weak in the knees, and staggered into the hallway. The mirror was gone, but something was scratched into the drywall. A single phrase, over and over again. We see what you see. It filled the entire wall. Dozens of copies of it, in different sizes and pressures. Some of my handwriting, some of my grandmother's, some in a smaller hand. childlike. I locked myself in the bedroom and called Lorna. Told her everything. Again, there was a pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. "What do you remember about your grandfather?" I blinked. "He died before I was born. Nana never talked about him." "That's not entirely true." "What?" "Your grandmother mentioned him once. Back when I was working with her in the community group. She said he died in the water." I felt cold. She didn't mean drowning, did she? "No," Lorna whispered. "She meant he disappeared into it." I dug out the rest of the books from the closet. There were more notes, more marginalia, pages ripped and taped back in. But one page stood out. In the back of a water-stained Bible, Nana had written a single memory. He stood over the tub and listened, and the child reached up, but the water had no face. Beneath it, in shaking cursive, he looked and smiled and never spoke again. I couldn't stay in the apartment anymore. Not because I was afraid of what I'd see, but because I was starting to understand it. There's a danger in that. Once you understand the quiet, you begin to see it everywhere. In cracks between words, in the pause between two heartbeats, in the moment just before someone dies and their breath stops but their eyes are still open. So I left. I drove 3 hours west to Deepwell, the town Grandma grew up in, the place where it started. The town wasn't dead, but might as well have been. 2 gas stations, 1 grocery, no motel. I slept in my car. In the morning, I found the library. It was barely operational. 1 volunteer. Dust everywhere. Half the lights dead, but the archives still worked. I searched for anything. Newspapers, church records, census documents. That's where I found the witness room. An old, grainy article from 1961. The headline read, 5 parish children hospitalized after spiritual event in witness room. No one was charged. No further detail given. But the article mentioned the old church by name, St. Hedwig's. And one of the names listed, Cartwright Lionel, age 7. I felt my chest seize. It was real, all of it. But what really made me spiral, what made me physically gag, was the black and white photo printed beside the article. A group of children outside the church. One of them held a toy, a plastic car, blue. I left the library in a daze and followed the address listed for the church. It was gone, burned to the foundation. Only the stone stairs remained, leading to nothing. But as I stood there, I felt the air change. The same stillness, the same pressure. And then I heard a sound that didn't belong in the daylight. Drip, not from above, from beneath the stairs. I found the door by accident. A rusted hatch half buried in mud and ivy, behind the remains of the chapel wall. It took all my strength to lift it. Hinges screamed like they hadn't been touched in years. Stale, wet air breathed out, and somewhere below, I could hear it again. Drip, drip, drip. I took a step down, then another, then another. The stairs went far too deep for a church that size, and at the bottom, there was no altar, no pews, only a single room, circular, lined with bathtubs, each one filled to the brim with still water. And in the center of the room, sitting on a chair facing away from me, was a man. He was bald, wearing a hospital gown, skin gray and thin, hands folded in his lap. I stepped closer. His voice was dry as paper. "You've come to see. Are you? Cartwright." "I was," he said. "What is this place?" He turned his head slowly, just enough for me to see his mouth. It wasn't a mouth anymore. It was a black, wet hole, and from it came only one word. "Welcome." Part 7. Below the surface of silence. He didn't move, just sat in that chair, hunched like someone who had forgotten how bones worked, mouth gaping into a black shape that refused to be a mouth. It pulsed slightly, like it breathed, though I heard no air. I took one cautious step forward. The smell was worse than rot. It was the scent of memory gone stagnant, like old paper left in the rain. like a closet that hadn't been opened in decades. Cartwright, or whatever was left of him, spoke again without lips. "You can leave, but it won't leave you. What is this place?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, the bathtubs around the room began to fill, not with water, with visions. In each tub, a scene played out like a film projected through liquid. A boy screaming in a church basement, clawing at his own eyes. A woman standing still for hours in her flooded kitchen, smiling at nothing. A nurse dragging a blanket over a motionless patient while a black smear slithered across the floor behind her. And then I saw myself, sitting in my own tub, mouth slightly open, eyes glassy. Drip, drip, drip. The reflection in the mirror above me wasn't copying me anymore. It was moving first. Cartwright groaned. His voice sounded like water down a drain. "You see now, the witness is not a being. It is not a ghost. It is what grows in the gaps between perception, in silence, in memory, in the moment before understanding." "Then why me?" I asked. "Why any of us?" His jaw twitched. "You were born near stillness, raised among those who looked away. And you remembered." I felt the copper again, faint at first, then bitter, soaking into the back of my throat. Drip. It was coming from a ceiling now. Even here, I backed away. The tubs trembled. The water inside began to rise, not overflow, just rise unnaturally, forming column-like shapes. Fluid towers, and in each a face. Not human, not alien. Reflected. They were not faces we see in real life. They were the faces we imagine in nightmares but never describe aloud. Shaped by silence. Mouths too wide. Eyes too many or none at all. Some turned toward me. Others away. One leaned forward as if trying to whisper. But no sound came out. Only a wave of remembering. Suddenly I was 6 again. I was back in my grandmother's house. In the bathroom. I was hiding. I heard water running. Not from a faucet, from the walls. I walked slowly to the tub and looked down. And saw nothing. But then I did see something. A pair of eyes. Just beneath the surface. Watching me. From the other side. I didn't tell anyone. I forgot. Until now. I dropped to my knees, gasping. The taste in my mouth was unbearable. Like pennies in mold and old regret. Cartwright stood, or rather, rose, as if lifted by invisible threads. He hovered a few inches above the floor, arms out. His chest began to split down the middle, peeling open like wet paper. Inside was a mouth, but not a new one. It was mine. It smiled, and from that open wound came my own voice, distorted and cold. "You were never supposed to leave the tub." I ran, back up the stairs, past the rusted hatch, through the ashes of a church, into the car. I drove without thinking, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, eyes never leaving the rearview mirror. And what I saw there was me, not distorted, not monstrous, just younger, watching and dripping. I got back to Lorna's place at sunrise. She was already waiting outside, like she'd known. I collapsed into her arms. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We had both heard the silence, and now it was inside us. That night, she showed me a mark behind her left ear, a small black dot, no bigger than a freckle. She asked if I had one. I didn't know, until I found it, behind my own ear. It wasn't a freckle. It pulsed, and in the silence between our words, I heard a new voice. A child's. "Do you want to see again?" Part 8. Silence has memory. That night, I didn't try to sleep. Sleep is a door. Dreams are invitations. And I'd already RSVP'd. Instead, I sat on Lorna's porch with a blanket around my shoulders, sipping tea neither of us drank. The air was still, like something massive was holding its breath beneath the ground. Across the street, a sprinkler clicked on, but the water didn't spray. It rose, hung in air like glass shards. Reflections shimmered inside each drop. A face. My face. Lorna sat next to me, eyes locked forward. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You're slipping. I know. You can't stay here. I know that too." We said nothing for a long time. Then she asked, "What did it show you in Deepwell?" I turned to her slowly. "Not the future. Not the past. Then what? The in-between." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. It wants to be seen, but not understood. And when we understand it, it understands us back. That's when we heard it. Not in the house, not on the street. In our heads. A child's voice. Soft, gentle, but unmistakably inside. One must stay below to keep the others dry. The tea spilled out of my hands. My vision blurred. I stood without meaning to. My body was already leaving, and Lorna knew. She didn't cry. She just reached for my wrist, pressed something into my palm. A photograph. Me and her. A hiking trip years ago. Real. Solid. Anchored to something. Even if I leave, especially if you leave. I left before dawn. Drove until the road ended. Back to Deepwell. Back to the church ruins. The hatch was still open. The stairs waited. The air below was thicker now, like the tunnel was exhaling silence with every second. I descended. Each step felt heavier, like I was walking into the spine of the world. At the bottom, the tubs were gone. The witness room was empty, except for a mirror, freestanding, 7 feet tall, covered in black cloth. Waiting. I knew what I had to do. My grandmother had fled it. Cartwright had fed it. I had looked, and now I could end it, but not by destroying it. You can't destroy silence. You can only replace the one it speaks through. I reached out, gripped the cloth, pulled it away. No reflection, just depth. And in that depth, a sea of eyes. All mine, all watching. And in the center of that ocean, a single child sat in a tub, facing away, waiting. I whispered, "Don't turn around." But he did. Of course he did. And I saw me, younger, smiling, mouth wide open, dripping. The moment I met his eyes, everything collapsed inward. No sound, no light, only understanding. And in that void, the child inside me whispered the final rule. Those who remember must remain, or the silence will find new homes. I stepped into the mirror, sat in the tub, became still. Lorna found my car 2 days later, abandoned near the tree line. Inside, my phone was still recording. One final voice memo, just 5 words. "Don't listen when it drips." They say the apartment I once lived in was condemned after a pipe burst flooded the building. Nobody knows why the water left no damage. Nobody knows why the plumber quit mid-job, screaming about black fingerprints on the mirror. But sometimes, when it rains heavy and the streets are quiet, neighbors say you can hear a sound from the 3rd floor. Not a voice, not a scream, just a slow, careful drip that never splashes and never stops.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.